كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. So today's session, inshallah, we will go through the next part of the Ibn Abidin's poem, where he discusses in regards to he discusses that is there a hierarchy, in essence? Is there some sort of method that we will use to determine whose opinion fatwa should be given in accordance to? So you got all these different mujtahids who we stated previously will have different opinions. But then how do you work through this minefield to give fatwa on whose opinion? So is there some sort of hierarchy amongst these opinions? So he will firstly go through this, and it's fairly easy. Hopefully this is easy to understand. But then he mentions certain scholars, their opinions, slight variations, but generally everyone mentioning the same gist of the gist of what everyone's mentioned is very, very similar. So he will go through that. When the Sahibain, the students of Imam Sab, differ with Imam Sab, that's the main point. What happens then? So there's certain opinions, generally three main opinions. We'll go through those opinions, inshallah. Then we will move on to what the Mufti, in essence, today, in our time, will be doing. Does the Mufti have the same scope like the earlier scholars had, the earlier scholars of our madhab had, in essence, to try to give preponderance to an opinion over another opinion? Do they have that scope? And where in our school, in certain places, a ruling is given contrary to Imam Saab's opinion, why was that? We will go through that as well, inshallah. So that should bring us to an end for today's discussion, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now we move on to the next part of the poem that Ibn Abidin mentions. He says, وَحَيْثُ لَمْ يُوجَدْ لَهُ اخْتِيَارُ فَقَوْلُ يَعْقُوبَ هُوَ الْمُخْتَارُ. So where there isn't found for Imam Abu Hanifa a chosen opinion, so Imam Abu Hanifa doesn't have a opinion that seems to be the chosen one, meaning we don't know which way Imam Sab is, or because Imam Sab doesn't have an opinion or mentioned opinion regarding this, then the opinion of Ya'qub, meaning Imam Abu Yusuf rahmatullahi alayhi, will be the mukhtar, will be the chosen opinion. Then he says, ثُمَّ مُحَمَّدٌ فَقَوْلُهُ الْحَسَنُ ثُمَّ زُفَرْ وَابْنُ زِيَادٍ الْحَسَنُ. Then Imam Muhammad, his statement will be the preferred one, his statement will be the good one, the one to go with. Then Imam Zufar and Ibn Ziyad, meaning Hassan ibn Ziyad. So they're both in the same rank. وقيل بالتخيير في فتواه إن خالف الإمام صاحباه. And another opinion is that there is a choice in giving fatwa if his students, meaning Imam Abu Hanifa's students, conflict Imam Sab. So Imam Sab's on one side, and there's two students, Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf, the Sahibain, are on the other side. So now you've got a choice. That's one opinion. وقيل من دليله أقوى رجح أو رجح وذا لمفت ذي اجتهاد أو ذي اجتهاد الأصح ذي اجتهاد الأصح. So he says, and another opinion is that whose ever evidence is stronger, that opinion will be given preponderance. And that is obviously for a person who is a mufti of ijtihad, meaning there are mufti and there are mujtahid. and this is the most correct opinion in regards to this. So now he's going to now detail each and every part of this particular poem. And he first says, very easily, he mentions some very easy concept that obviously we've already prayed before. He says that generally speaking, we will give fatwa on when all our imams, the general imams of ours, are in consensus with one another. Imam Abu Hanifa plus Sahibain, they all say one ruling, then you have to give fatwa on that. Okay, it's not permissible for anybody to conflict that particular ruling. So that's the first thing to understand. Then he says that now if there's a conflict, there's no ittifaq, there's no consensus agreement, but there is a conflict. So now we will go with what Imam Abu Hanifa chose. Whatever Imam Abu Hanifa's opinion is, we will generally go with that. Whether, it doesn't matter if the Sahibain are with him, either one of them are with him or anything, we generally go with what Imam Sab says. Now, if we don't have a chosen opinion of Imam Sab, so he's got multiple opinions, we don't have a clear preponderance chosen opinion, which one he chose, or we don't have an opinion from Imam Sab, for example, in a mas'ala, then what will happen? Then we give preference to what Imam Abu Yusuf rahmatullahi alayh, he chose his opinion. Imam Yusuf is also known as Ya'qub. Ya'qub is his original name. Abu Yusuf is his kunniya, obviously, because he is obviously the senior student of Imam Abu Hanifa. And then he mentions that if we don't have a chosen opinion of Imam Abu Yusuf rahmatullahi alayh, then we go with what Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan mentions, because he is next in line in terms of seniority, in terms of who we follow when it comes to these opinions. So we follow Imam Muhammad next. Then if we have no chosen opinion from any of these, even Imam Muhammad doesn't have a chosen opinion here, or he has nothing mentioned, then we will give preference to Imam Zufar and Hasan ibn Ziyad. So their opinion, both of them, their opinions are on one rank. Both of them are of the same rank. Some are of the opinion that Imam Zufar is first, then Hasan ibn Ziyad after that. So this is the hierarchy in essence, if you were to write it all out, to understand how the madhab ranks the opinions of these imams of ours in essence. Then he then mentions that there is an opinion, which he kind of indicated to in the poem, that if Imam Sahib is on one side and the Sahibain are on the other side, so Imam Sahib's alone stating a particular opinion, and the Sahibain, Imam Sahib's two students, meaning Imam Yusuf and Imam Muhammad, on the other side, then the Mufti has a choice to give fatwa on this one or that one. Okay? So that's one opinion. And the other opinion is that no, you don't have a choice. There's no choice. The only person that has a choice is the Mufti, who's a mujtahid. Only that person has a choice because of his ranking of ijtihad, because that person has ranking of ijtihad. They can look into evidences and determine which evidence is stronger. So these are the initial opinions that he mentions as to how to rank the rulings in terms of opinions attributed to the Imams. Then now he goes on to evidencing from various quotes from different scholars, because that's what Ibn Abidi likes to do. He likes to back up what he's saying using evidences from the scholars of the madhab. So he first mentions from Fatawa Sirajiyya, this is Sirajuddin Ali bin Uthman. He is 575 death date. So he quotes from him saying that then the fatwa unconditionally will be according to Imam Abu Hanifa's opinion. That's the first thing to understand. Yeah, whether unconditionally means whether any of the Sahibain are with Imam Sahib or they're both against Imam Sahib in this, doesn't matter. unconditionally Imam Saab's opinion will be first in terms of ranking. Then the opinion of Imam Abu Yusuf, then the opinion of Muhammad, then the opinions of Imam Zufr and Hasan ibn Ziyad. So this is the quote that he mentions from him. And then he mentions, then it's also been said the same exact thing, that when Imam Abu Hanifa is on one side, the Sahibin on the other side, the Mufti has a choice. But the better thing would be that he would follow the sequencing, follow Imam Abu Hanifa first, like this. That's if the Mufti is not a mujtahid, then he would have to follow the sequencing. So he mentions this. And then he goes on to expounding the same thing that I've already mentioned, that if there's no opinion mentioned from Imam Saab, then you go with Imam Yusuf and so on. And then the question arises that how was Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad, students of Imam Saab, able to have the audacity to even go against Imam Saab in a particular ruling? So they did what they did, he says, because they knew that if Imam Saab saw what we see, then he would have given fatwa like this. So this is how they did what they did. And also, like I said to you previously, that the mashayikh of the madhab, the later scholars of the madhab, they gave preponderance to a particular ruling based on this concept as well. So yeah, he goes on to quoting various scholars in this way. Then he gives a conclusion. The conclusion is, when Imam Saab and Sahibain are in consensus on a particular ruling, that will be the madhab. That will have to be in accordance to what the fatwa will have to be given on. And it's not permissible to go to any other opinion unless there is a need, which will be discussed later, what kind of need. Then the second one is when one of the two companions, the Sahibain, are with Imam Saab. Then again, you have to give fatwa. So if the Shaykhain on one side or the Tarafain on one side, you would have to give fatwa based on their opinion. Then the third scenario is when they are all different. So all three of them mention a different opinion. Then again, fatwa will be on Imam Saab's opinion, because Imam Saab's ijtihad is higher than the other two's, the students. So that's the third scenario. The fourth scenario he mentions that if Imam Saab is on one side and the Sahibain both agree together upon one opinion, then there are different opinions now. So some say still Imam Saab's opinion will be given preference to. I've explained this previously as well. Then another opinion is that no, the Mufti, who's a mujtahid, will have a choice. He will have a choice that he can give fatwa on Sahibain's opinion or Imam Saab's opinion, based on strength of evidence. So this is what he goes on to mention. He mentions this from the Hawi as well, that al-asah an al-ibrata li quwwati ad-dalil, that the consideration will be for strength of evidence. But obviously then that means, that is very fairly obvious, that would mean that this is in relation to a person who is able to look into evidences. So now he mentions another simpler conclusion. He says that therefore, when the Sahibain, they are differing with Imam Saab, so there are three opinions here now. One opinion is you still have to follow Imam Saab without any choice. You still have to go with Imam Saab. Second is you have a choice, meaning without any condition, you have a choice. Either give fatwa here or either give fatwa here. It's up to you. You have a choice. And the third opinion, which he says is the most valid, the correct opinion, is that if the Mufti is mujtahid, then he has a choice. And if the Mufti is not mujtahid, he's muqallid, he's a follower, then he has no choice. He has to give fatwa on Imam Saab's opinion. So this is the general rule. But like I said, it will all depend on the first principle that we prayed at the beginning of the Usul al-Ifta already, that if the scholars of preponderance have already given preponderance or to a certain opinion, then you have to follow that according to what the madhab has stated. So all of this has to be understood in relation to all this discussion, inshallah. Then he goes on to explain that there is no difference of opinion amongst our scholars, that if one of the students of Imam Saab are with Imam Saab, so the Shaykhain on one side or the Tarafain on one side, then we give fatwa based on that opinion. And he says this is why Qadi Khan mentions, if there is in a ruling which is differed regarding differed amongst our scholars, if with Imam Saab there is one of his students, then that opinion will be taken. So you will take the opinion, like I said, of the Shaykhain and or the Tarafain. Why? Because this fulfills the criteria, the conditions of gathering the most correct evidences. Because generally speaking, both of them would be on one side because the evidences are stronger on that side. That's what he's in essence saying. This is, again, we're generalizing because certain rulings will be different. Meaning, if you pick out certain small rulings, they will be different. Now, then he says, meaning Qadi Khan continues to say, now, if both Sahibain are contrary, giving a different ruling to Imam Saab. So all of this, can you see, Ibn Abidin is just quoting from different scholars to verify what he's already mentioned, because we've already read regarding this. So he says the same thing, that but he expands a little bit here, saying that if this ikhtilaf, this difference of opinion between Imam Saab on one side and Sahibain on the other side, is a ikhtilaf of time and era. It's the difference of opinion came about because the times changed, the people have changed. Then obviously you will take in accordance to what the current time is. So in essence, there's an example for this, that Imam Saab, for example, he ruled that the Qadi, the judge, when he has witnesses, then witnesses by default will already be considered upright. Yeah? Unless the Imam, the Qadi, has a reason to suspect otherwise. But default state of the people was that they were generally adil, they were generally upright, so we will hold that default position for these witnesses. So he can take the witnessing of these people just based on, we call it the Zahirul Adala, the apparent uprightness of the witnesses, because the people at that time were upright, because that was the Khairul Qurun, in essence, we call the best of times, Imam Saab's times, which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, Khairul Quruni Qarni, thumma alladhina yalunahum, thumma alladhina yalunahum. So that last time period, which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave testimony for being the best of times, was the time which Imam Saab was in. Now, after that time came about the Sahibain's time, where it became predominant amongst the people that they weren't adil anymore, they weren't upright. The masses of people were not upright. People were cheating, people were lying a lot. There was, a lot of things going on like this. So therefore, the Sahibain ruled now. The default case of people no longer is like it was in the time of our teacher, Imam Abu Hanifa. Now we will state that the default case of the people is not to be upright. So that means the Qadi cannot go on the general state of people. He's going to have to now find out. He's going to have to do research to find out whether these witnesses are actually upright or not. So he's going to have to send people to find out regarding these witnesses. He cannot base his ruling on Zahirul Adala in essence anymore. So now this was an ikhtilaf between Imam Saab and Sahibain, but that ikhtilaf, can you see, it's based on the time changing. So Sahibain, as we previously understood, would have ruled in accordance to this, would have had confidence to rule in accordance to this, because they know that if Imam Sahib was here at this time and he sees what we're seeing, then he would also say what we're saying. So it's not really an ikhtilaf as such. It looks like an ikhtilaf on the surface, looks like a difference of opinion on the surface, but actually they're saying the same thing in essence, because they're going by default state of the people. So this is a point that Qadi Khan mentions, that if it's a difference of opinion based on the time changing, the people's state changing, then again, we will base the ruling on that particular state. There's many other examples for this as well, that he kind of indicates and alludes to, where Sahibain's opinion is going to be taken now because of the state of the people changing or the time changing. And if there's anything else, other rulings that are not based on time change and things like that, then obviously we will go with the, or in fact he says, the mufti who's a mujtahid will get a choice. He will give a ruling based on what he deems to be more suited to the ruling that he's ruling in particular in regards to. But he does quote from Abdullah ibn Mubarak, who says, rahimahullah, who says that no, Imam Sab's qawl will be taken. Imam Sab's opinion will be taken, and we will not go against Imam Sab. So we've already prayed that there were scholars that who always were very devout followers of Imam Sab's opinion, and they would have said that no, you have to give fatwa in accordance to Imam Sab's opinion, because you have no valid reason to go against him. So he brings this discussion here. Then he brings quotes from various other scholars stating the same thing from Tatar Khaniya. Bahar mentions from Tatar Khaniya the same thing, to follow this hierarchy that we talked about. Imam Sab first, going all the way down to Imam Zufar Imam, and Imam Hassan al-Ziyad. Then again, he's quoting from scholars and their rasail, their writings, to give the same conclusion. Then he quotes from Allama Qasim Kutlubugha, who in essence concludes again the same thing, that it's necessary for a mujtahid to rule in accordance to what we've just said, the hierarchy that we've mentioned, giving preference to Imam Sab's evidences first, and so on. And then he clarifies from Allama Biri that we were talking about a mujtahid mufti. Who are we talking about? Which type of ijtihad we are talking about? So he says that it's anybody who reaches the levels of ijtihad. So obviously a mujtahid fil madhab at least. So anybody who's at least mujtahid fil madhab and above. And then he actually mentions, expounding upon this further, that the person who is able to extrapolate rulings upon that which was clearly mentioned by the Imam. So this would be the Ahlut Takhrij, if you remember, the Ashabut Takhrij. They were able to extrapolate rulings because they were experts regarding in regards to the madhab of the ruling of Imam Abu Hanifa. So they were experts in this, and also they were able to give preference to one opinion over another opinion, meaning now this would include the Ashabut Tarjih as well. So he says that all of these people can be addressed by this, meaning a mujtahid mufti would be inclusive of all of these rankings of scholars, that they would have the capacity to be able to do this. So in essence, up to category number 5, of what Ibn Kamal al-Basha mentioned, these, meaning not including 5 and 6, but up to category numbers, these categories, 5, including 5. So 1, 2, 3, which were the levels of ijtihad, and 4 and 5, the Ashab al-Takhrij and Ashab al-Tarjih. Up until there, including category number 5, they will be allowed to have this choice of where to give fatwa on, if Sahibain on one side and Imam Sahib on the other side. So all of these things need to be looked at. So now, moving on to the next part of the poem of Ibn Abidin, where he says, فَالْآنَ لَا تَرْجِيهَ بِالدَّلِيلِ فَلَيْسَ إِلَّا الْقَوْلُ بِالتَّفْصِيلِ. So now, meaning in our time now, obviously Ibn Abidin is talking from his time, he says there is no preponderance based on evidence. So there was this originally in the madhab, that preponderance was given in accordance to evidences, but the scholars of our madhab, the scholars that came, they worked tirelessly in giving preponderance already based on evidences. So all of that is already done. So he says the only thing that remains today is to give the opinion, to give the fatwa in essence, based on the tafsil, means the hierarchy that we talked about, in accordance to the hierarchy, meaning giving preference to Imam Sab first, then giving to Imam Yusuf, then Imam Muhammad, then Imam Zufar and Hasan ibn Ziyad. So that's all that remains today. If there is an ikhtilaf between the opinions, Ibn Abidin mentions first. So he says, ما لم يكن خلافه المصحح فنأخذ الذي لهم قد وضح. As long as contrary to it is not given preponderance, we will take that which for them it's been, there's a clarification. So if there is a mas'ala which is been clearly mentioned by our Imam, then we will take that as long as there is no opposing opinion that the scholars gave preponderance to. So فإننا نراهم قد رجه مقال بعد صاحبه وصحه. So we see that they, meaning the fuqaha of our madhab, they gave preference to some of them, to the opinions of some of his students, meaning some of the students of Imam Sahib, and they verified that, they made that the correct opinion. So he says, من ذا قد رجه لزفر مقاله في 17. And that is why they gave preponderance to Imam Zufar, meaning Imam Zufar's opinion, in 17 places. So this is the next part of the poem where he is continuing this discussion that we started off with before this, that generally we will go with the opinions of Imam Sahib, but this is something that needs to be remembered as well. So now he goes into a little bit of detail in this discussion, explaining that the fatwa will be on Imam Sahib's opinion, generally speaking, but there is this detail that we talked about. So he says that the mufti in our time, in essence, is not a scholar of preponderance, because that's not his job. He's not going to do that anymore. That has already been done by the scholars of preponderance in our madhab, but he will simply be a follower. He will follow the preponderance. His job is now to find the preponderance and to give fatwa based on that preponderance. So he says that we already understood, he said, that the mufti who's a mujtahid will give fatwa based on, he's got a choice in certain rulings, and he'll give fatwa based on what the dalil is stronger for. But when he says that the mufti mujtahid in our times no longer exists, there aren't mujtahid muftis anymore. So the only thing remaining now, he says, is simply to do taqleed. Reason being is that there is no ijtihad to be done. So therefore, we just follow the details that have been mentioned. So we will give fatwa based on firstly Imam Sab's opinion, then obviously Imam Yusuf's, and following on the methodology, the hierarchy as mentioned. So we see, he says, that the mujtahidun of the madhab, they did not preponderate a opinion which was contrary to Imam Sab. Only they did that, meaning they did do that only based on strength of evidence, or based on the time changing, which we talked about, the era changing, the people changing, or based on, he says, things like this, which we will obviously mention later. So because they already did this, our job is now to follow what they have done. Just like if these scholars were alive today, then and they gave fatwa, we will follow what they did. So therefore, our job now is to follow their opinion. Just because they've passed away doesn't mean that we won't follow their opinion or the preponderance that they have done. So he says, this is the reason we have seen that sometimes they gave preference to the opinion of the Sahibain, sometimes they gave preference to the opinion of Imam Abu Yusuf, sometimes they gave preference to the Imam Abu Muhammad, sometimes they even gave preference to the opinion of Imam Zufar rahmatullahi alayh, like he says in 17 different masail, which Allama Biri has mentioned in his risala, upon the risala of the poem of Allama Hamawi. Then he says that some of the masail that Allama Biri has listed, that this here is the ruling, we give the mas'ala in accordance to Imam Zufar's fatwa, or Imam Zufar's ruling. He says that some of them need to be corrected, which he says he is corrected in his Raddul Muhtar, where he mentions all of these masail under the chapter of nafaqat, babun nafaqa. He mentions in his Hashia upon Raddul Muhtar, upon the Dul Muhtar, his Hashia Raddul Muhtar, he mentions this. If you've got the Shamila, then it is volume 3, page 607. There, Ibn Abidin lists the different rulings that fatwa is given in accordance to Imam Zufar's opinion, and where he says that actually here is not Imam Zufar's opinion, because, for example, Imam Abu Yusuf's opinion also exists here of the same thing that Imam Zufar has mentioned. So then we don't necessarily have to say that we're giving fatwa based on Imam Zufar's opinion. We're giving based on Abu Yusuf's opinion. Or there are some where Imam Muhammad's opinion is also like Imam Zufar's opinion. So here, why are we saying that, or why is Allama Biri mentioning that fatwa is given in accordance to Imam Zufar's opinion, whereas we could have been giving fatwa based on Imam Muhammad's opinion here? So he says that it's not only Imam Zufar's opinion in some of those places, though in many of those places it is. Nevertheless, Ibn Abidin, he mentions there, and then he does quote it from Bahr, and there is an addition that there are a few masail, I think 4 or 5 masail, which Ibn Abidin then he adds on to the list of Allama Biri. So it takes the total to some beyond 20, 22 or 24, according to different people, masail, upon which Imam Zufar's opinion, the fatwa is given in accordance to in our madhab. So this is something just to bear in mind, that there are a substantial amount of rulings in which, or upon which, Imam Zufar's opinion in our madhab is given fatwa on. So that's that. Then he quotes from Bahr, where in Bahr he mentions in the chapter of Qada, chapter of juridical rulings, he says that if somebody was to pose a question that how is it permissible for our, the mashayikh of our school to give fatwa on an opinion contrary to Imam Abu Hanifa's opinion, despite them being muqallids really, So how can they do this? So he says also that this, we already covered this from Ibn Abdin's perspective. So now he's quoting this from Sahib al-Bahr, the author of Bahr. He says that this was something which was for a very lengthy time. This was a difficult discussion, difficult, a comprehension for me. I couldn't really comprehend this. It was a difficulty for me. And he says, I didn't find any answer which I could understand. He says, until now. And that is, he says, that there is a famous opinion or famous quote from Imam Sahib stating that لا يحل لأحد أن يفتي بقولنا حتى يعلم من أين قلنا, that it's not permissible for anyone to give fatwa on our opinion. Meaning Imam Sahib is saying it's not permissible for you to give fatwa based on my opinion until you know where I got it from. Meaning you have to know where I got this opinion from. So he says this is the reason why sometimes some scholars went against Imam Sahib's opinion, because they couldn't work out where this opinion had come from for Imam Sahib. They didn't know the evidence for it, because Imam Sahib didn't mention the evidence of that particular ruling. So if they couldn't work out the evidence, then that means they didn't go according to that ruling, because Imam Sahib said, you can't give fatwa based on my opinion. So this is what Sahib al-Bahr is mentioning as to the reason why they were able to give fatwa contrary to Imam Sahib's opinion, because this was the instruction in essence of Imam Sahib. So this will in essence add to what we've previously talked about. But inshallah next time we will expound upon this, because there is a lot of detail in regards to this particular statement. Does this statement simply mean, on the face value, that somebody can't give fatwa until you know what the evidences are? Is that true? Is that, as the statement suggests? So there's a lot of detail there. Inshallah, next time we'll go through the details. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. So today, alhamdulillah, we went through the next part of the poem of Ibn Abdin, which very nicely summarized is that there is a hierarchy when it comes to the preference that we will give to whose opinion. So firstly, we give preference to Imam Abu Hanifa's opinion, but when there is no preference of Imam Sahib's opinion, because there's no preponderance on Imam Sahib's opinion, or we don't find Imam Sahib's chosen opinion, we don't know which side Imam Sahib chose the opinion for, so then we will go with what Imam Abu Yusuf mentions. Then if we don't find what Imam Abu Yusuf's opinion was, or what opinion he chose, he's got various opinions, then we will go with Imam Muhammad's opinion, and then Imam Hassan ibn Ziyad and Imam Zufar's all being in one rank. So that's what we'll go with. Then he mentions that if Imam Sahib has an opinion, then we will go with Imam Sahib's. Obviously, firstly, before that, in fact, he mentions that if all our three Imams are, Imam Sahib and his students are all in agreement on a particular mas'ala, then you have to rule accordance to that. Likewise, second stage is if one of them agrees with Imam Sahib, so the Shaykhain on one side or the Tarafain on one side, then you have to give fatwa on that as well. Likewise, if they're all separate, so Imam Sahib's on one side, Imam Muhammad says something different to what Imam Yusuf also says, so all three of them say something different, then you have to give fatwa based on Imam Sahib's opinion. So these three first, because on all of them you're giving fatwa based on Imam Sahib's opinion in essence. And the fourth one he mentions is where they are differing with Imam Sahib. So if they differ, meaning together they are Sahibain are together and Imam Sahib's on the other side. So this is where you had the three opinions come about. One opinion is that you still have to follow Imam Sahib. The other opinion was that, you have a choice. And last opinion was that no, only a Mujtahid Mufti will have a choice. Everybody else will still have to follow Imam Sahib. So then he goes into discussing this. And then he mentions that the Mufti of today, though, however, will not do any of these preponderances, because the scholars of our madhab have already done all the preponderances, have threshed out the masail of the school, and they have already given preponderance to whichever evidence had to be, whichever opinion was stronger in evidence or was in accordance to the changing of time or the changing of the state of the people, or whatever other reason there was a darura, there was a need. So we based the ruling on, for example, Imam Muhammad's opinion. So they all did all of this preponderating already. So our job now is to find the preponderance and to give the fatwa based on that particular preponderance. So he goes on to that, and he also mentions that this is why you find that sometimes the scholars of our madhab, they even gave preponderance to Imam Zufar's opinion over everybody else's opinion in the school, based on all of these factors that we kind of talked about. But he doesn't expound upon these factors because the factors of preponderance will come later, inshallah.